The coming of Nibiru while the Anunnaki never left. Let's remember the pantheon of ancient Greek gods and others like the Sumerian gods and even the Anu of the Native Americans were extraterrestrials from space. And in many cases, they were huge beings. Now, the shocking interview given by Bob Dean in September 2008 in Arizona, in which he refers to all the secret projects and the unexplained mysteries of our times. Indeed, the Anunnaki exist, the Ark of the Covenant has been found, Lake Vostok of Russia hides great secrets, Nibiru is coming, enjoy him. I was a normal person, the author says here, for much of my life. When I learned that what I learned in 1963, 64, 65, my life changed, and what I had learned became my obsession. And all these years I have learned much more. The old model collapsed around me. The world I thought I was living in was not the real world I was living in, and the reality was not what I really understood. I discovered that many of what we see is an illusion. We humans sometimes, instead of facing reality, create a small world of our own. We know, we get up, we go to work, we raise the children, we buy a house, a car, we are going on vacation. We go on with our lives, we try to save money, which we put in the bank for the children's college, and we live a normal life. And then I learned that there is no normal life, quote unquote, that the world that exists is not what we all think it is. The old model crashed under my feet, he says here. I'm sitting here in front of you like a human wreck, we could say, as to what I used to be, because I have lived in a world cut out and sewn to specific measures. I've been a member of the network called the Old Boys Network for over 40 years, and when this network was created, it consisted of soldiers of all ranks, all services. We even had 2 cosmonauts who connected us with us and provided information. Well, all these years, the old boys, we exchanged information with each other because we held high positions in the Army. In our ranks, we had a pair of admirals, 2 cosmonauts, countless colonels, and majors, sergeants, people from all walks of life, all over the world, who provided information that we shared with each other, and some of us held very sensitive positions and had access to very high quality material. Initially, there were more than 150 people, but nowadays there are not more than 10. Abnormal anomaly. There is a top secret group among the secret groups called the National Reconnaissance Bureau, and for many years, the EGA had a series of satellites called the Keyhole System. It was a top secret and probably the best satellite system in the world, and it could read the stamp from space. The officials of EGA focused on what was called anomalies, Ararat, which is a puzzle. When the images were downloaded to the computer and after they were processed, analyzed, and cleaned, everyone was left with their mouths opened. And there are links here for the photos. They exclaimed that there was a boat, a big boat, so they sent a group of selected Marines who parachuted in and spent several days in this large boat. When they returned, they brought with them some irregular objects, quote unquote, which have never been described or named, and these irregular objects were classified as something more than top secret. Initially, it was the Ararat anomaly. Then they discovered a giant ship, which may be Noah's Ark, but no one knows for sure. It's probably a ship that can be built by man, and from findings we understand that it was made of wood. And it really is the work of greatness. This ship, no one knows when it survived, when it was during the last flood, perhaps. The last rumor said about 12,000 years ago or 10,500 BC. What could possibly be found in this great shipwreck of Ararat that is so sensitive? Nobody knows. There are also reports of another object that is much higher, very close to the top. And then we have Vostok Lake. Lake Vostok is a sensitive story in itself. Beneath the ice in Antarctica is a freshwater lake, deep beneath the ice, which is 100 miles long, 50 miles wide. This lake is it contains fresh water. The temperature of the lake is about 65 degrees, but at the bottom of the lake is what is known as the mascon, a massive pool of metal, very similar to the mascons they discovered on the moon, a giant circular metal object deep beneath the ice at the bottom of Lake Vostok. It's one of the most sensitive things today. Another top secret. Public opinion should know why it cannot handle it. The consequences are huge. But the Chinese know it. They have gone to another level, and the last thing I heard is that they have a satellite orbiting the moon, and they have a lot of photos in their possession. I hope China publishes photos, something NASA has not done, which took thousands of photos with Project Clementine. Project Clementine was not a program of NASA, but of the Army, of the Ministry of Defense. They took thousands of pictures. Only about a dozen have been released, and they took all the pictures around the moon, backside, bottom, top, everywhere. Our original space program was a product of the Nazi Party with von Braun, his collaborators, and Project Paperclip. I don't think we would have reached the moon and certainly been defeated by the Russians because they too grabbed scientists. And the Russians have a huge scientific program of their own. They did not need a Nazi after all. They did it on their own. One of the biggest secrets is the secret space program. Why do we keep the huge facilities on the moon secret? Facilities which are not ours. Anunnaki. There are 4 groups that I have met, and they are all humanoid. In fact, one group is human. Not all of them are 9 feet tall. The beautiful story in chapter 6 of Genesis, the Genesis giants, they made the genes and the chromosomes of all the existing species on the planet in a laboratory, Sitchin says, 20,000 years ago. The information I have shows that 60,000 years ago, one of the most important upgrades took place when Homo sapiens was further genetically modified. The 4 groups are the people who are also called Nordics, the tall whites. Then there are the tall whites who are very tall and very pale, the grays and the Anunnaki. Gray is a technical form of life, man-made androids, an artificial form of life, laboratory products. Gray, this is a type of off-white color like flour. Giant objects are watching us. There are photos of giant objects that are watching us, and many of them are in orbit around the moon and Mars as well. The Russians, a few years ago, they sent their famous Phobos rocket system to Mars, which was hit by an irregular object, quote unquote, that emerged from the surface, but had taken a number of amazing photos before being destroyed and crashed. The Phobos program was sent because they hoped to land a landing vehicle on its satellite. The moon of Mars has 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos. Phobos has the monolith on it. There are 2 satellites, Phobos and Deimos. These 2 satellites have some anomalies. They are too small to be natural satellites. They are very close to the surface of Mars, and if they were really natural, they would have, due to gravity, crashed onto Mars. Phobos is about 12 miles in diameter, and Deimos is 6 to 7 miles. There is an intelligence on Mars that wants to limit our access to their reality, and that did not let the Russian satellites land, resulting in it going out of orbit and crashing. And from the knowledge I have and the limited amount of information I have, the main intelligence behind it all is the Anunnaki, the same group that genetically created us so many thousands of years ago. The Anunnaki never left, the author says. There are 2 factions on the planet which are divided. One side wants to use us as they always did. The other side wants to give us the opportunity to grow as a species and to shape our future, to define our own life. And obviously there is a difference of opinion. Now, what about nuclear war? I never thought we could go to nuclear war because the custodians would not allow it. Earth is precious. It's very rich reservoir of life. It's not only humans who are here on this planet, but also other creatures. This planet is an absolute abundance of beauty, beautiful life forms, and not only that, but also the flora and fauna. They have invested too much on the planet to let them get lost. Prime Detective. The most important guiding principle is to prohibit any interference with the internal development of extraterrestrial civilizations, but which have broken for centuries and even thousands of years. They have intervened according to our historical records. Back in ancient Greece, they also contributed to the bloody war of Troy. There were rumors, even in Homer's reports, that the gods themselves came down, split on both sides, and played in this game, and for them it's a game and nothing more. Planet X, NIBIRU. According to Sitchin and the Sumerians, it is a reality. Well, our astronomers have obviously come to the conclusion that it is indeed a reality. For almost a century, astronomers have been interested in so-called invaders who seem to come and go from time to time, and they can understand them from the disturbances and effects on other planets. The existence of this has been known for a long time, Planet X NIBIRU, but nothing has ever been said publicly about this. Well, in the early 1980s, JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab, sent a pair of pioneering satellites to determine if there was any truth to this. Astronomers pondered and sent an infrared astronomical satellite, IRIS, IRAS. This was done in 1983, and IRIS's mission was to receive infrared radiation throughout the ecliptic, up and down. And obviously IRIS has given two giant positive answers that yes, the 12th planet, or the 10th planet as you like to call it, yes, it's real. And this now rang for the good of the alarm bells. According to the Sumerians and the Sitchins, its last passage was around 1600 BC. That's the time of around the exodus of Moses from Egypt, the time of the volcano of Santorini, Hydra erupting. And 1600 BC, the passage, and its orbit lasts around 3,600 years. If you count this, you'll see the next passage is just about now. Every time NIBIRU makes a pass, this is not always destructive. It will depend on whether the planet Earth and NIBIRU are on the same side of the sun at the same time, and if we were on the same side of the sun at the same time, all hell would break out on planet Earth, of course. Well, obviously, the last pass caused the explosion of the volcano of Santorini in the Aegean Sea of Greece, the volcano of Hydra in the Mediterranean, dried up fire and brought to an end the great Minoan civilization, among others. It also affected Egypt. They exist in all archives. There are even historians and theologians who say that the eruption of Santorini caused the plagues of Egypt and allowed Moses to escape with the Israelites. NIBIRU, according to existing photos, is a beautiful planet, 2.5 times the size of our Earth. It's headed towards the center of the universe, and we know a lot about it except its name. Sitchin says that we can simply call it NIBIRU. Many argue that NIBIRU, once it comes from the other outer limits of our solar system, is going to be an icy rock that is not going to be the kind of place that any creature could or would like to live on. The researcher Andy Lloyd believes that what we see in the photos showing an orange object is actually a brown dwarf, and NIBIRU is one of its moons. But this is not an icy rock. Really, from the moment NIBIRU takes this such a long journey, and the sun seems like a small bit of light, one would say that it is natural to be icy. Obviously, the planet, like many planets in the universe, has its own heat. It has its core, a heat-generating system that's very similar to our core on the Earth. We have systems inside the core of our planet whose usefulness has been described as a thermonuclear reactor, very similar to the sun. And now most of life and all the generosity and all the beauty of life on this planet comes from our movement around this warm sun. I do not think NIBIRU is an icy rock. I think it generates enough heat through advanced technology, a kind of a Dyson sphere. The brilliant British astronomer Dyson said a few years ago that with an incredibly advanced technology, they have the ability to surrender the planet and maintain not only its heat but also its atmosphere. And I suspect the Anunnaki have done this for NIBIRU. And they probably did it hundreds of thousands of years or maybe a million years ago. I think the color of the planet is dull red glow color. It's a result of the golden shield they have created through the Dyson sphere. The question is why? Since they have so much engineering knowledge, they did not stay on Mars and continue their journey through the solar system. The Anunnaki were not the original inhabitants of Mars. They used Mars as a station, and now they have reactivated it. They used it to collide with Mars as they pass through this point in space. There are still a few remnants in original inhabitants of Mars. There are still some clues that I have been looking for, and I have got some evidence that we are hosting several Martians on our planet, and we're talking about the original species. Sitchin estimates that NIBIRU approach will take place 2060. I'm not so sure about that conclusion. The Ministry of Defense is very worried and whole departments of ministry working on it. The big question is whether we will be on the same side of the sun at the same time as NIBIRU passes. And the source is the arrival of NIBIRU, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.